Most of what you call reality does not come from outside. It is created inside you. Your brain interprets the world based on past experiences, old beliefs and patterns that you no longer even notice. Research shows that around 95% of our thoughts are repetitive and mostly negative. That means what you think you are seeing outside is often just a reflection of what is already happening inside. Imagine a simple situation. Two people are fired on the same day. One falls into despair and feels like he has lost everything. The other sees it as a chance to start over, change direction, and grow. The difference is not in what happened, but in the meaning they gave to it. The first believed his value was defined by his position. The second understood that a job does not define who he is. One fact, two completely different realities. What does this tell us? You don't react to facts. You react to the story your mind tells about them. And if that story is based on old fears, unresolved trauma, or limiting beliefs, your life will feel far more chaotic than it really is. But here is the most important part. This cycle is not final. Your thinking can be reprogrammed. The moment you begin to observe your thoughts instead of identifying with them, a new possibility appears, the possibility of choice. That is what we will explore in the next part. Why, even when you know you are repeating the same mistakes, you keep getting stuck in them. What makes you act on autopilot? And how to step out of that state without losing control over your own life. Have you noticed that even when you truly want to change, you keep repeating the same patterns of behavior? You always react the same way when you face disagreement, rejection, or loss of control. This is not a lack of willpower. It is autopilot. Our brains are designed to conserve energy, and one of the ways they do this is by turning emotional and behavioral patterns into unconscious habits. Research from Duke University suggests that about 40% of our daily actions are not conscious decisions, but automatic habits. That means nearly half of what you do every day is repetition. Imagine someone who always avoids conflict. From childhood, he learned that expressing his opinion caused arguments, so he began to stay silent. Today, even in situations where he could speak firmly, he remains quiet, not because he chooses to, but because once he learned that silence felt safer. That pattern became automatic, and this applies to almost everything. How you respond to disappointment, how you deal with difficulty. These are mental scripts formed over a lifetime, and now they run automatically without your awareness. The good news is that this autopilot can be switched off, but not magically. The first step is developing awareness, noticing in the moment which automatic reaction is playing again. Even that alone creates a small gap where you can choose a different response. In the next section, you will understand why trying to control everything only makes this dynamic worse, and how the desire for control often keeps you stuck in the same place. One of the main sources of anxiety today is the constant attempt to control what cannot truly be controlled: results, the future, other people. And the interesting part is this: the more you try to hold everything together, the more insecure you tend to feel. There is a simple explanation. The human brain hates uncertainty. It prefers a bad but predictable scenario over an unknown one. That is why people stay in uncomfortable jobs, unhappy relationships, or limiting situations, simply because there is at least some sense of control. But the truth is, that control is an illusion. You can plan, prepare, and try your hardest, but you will never be able to fully control how others behave, what happens tomorrow, or anything outside your influence. When someone tries to change another person, to control their words, actions, or decisions, it almost never leads to the desired outcome. Instead, it leads to frustration, conflict, and emotional burnout. Deep down, the urge to control comes from fear. People who overthink every detail, reread messages dozens of times before sending them, exhaust themselves trying to predict every possible outcome. The problem is that this does not bring peace. It creates even more tension. Studies show that people with a high need for control experience higher stress levels and cope worse with frustration. Here is the turning point. Admitting that you do not have total control does not mean giving up. It means shifting your focus to what truly depends on you, your choices, your reactions, your attitude. Silence sounds simple, but for many people, it is unbearable. Just a few minutes without stimulation and an undefined restlessness appears. That is why, the moment free time shows up, most people reach for their phones, turn on the TV, or play something in the background, anything to avoid hearing their own thoughts. This discomfort with silence has a reason, but because they are afraid to face that inner void. This constant running keeps the mind active but not present, and the result is emotional exhaustion, lack of clarity, and chronic dissatisfaction. The key is to change your relationship with silence, not to run from it, but to use those moments to listen to yourself. This is not about meditating for hours. It is about slowly learning to tolerate your own inner rhythm without endlessly filling it with noise. Being present is not a mystical idea. It is a practical skill, useful in everyday life. To be present means paying attention to what is happening right now, instead of being lost in thoughts about the past or worries about the future. It sounds simple, but it is rare. How many times have you been physically in one place while mentally somewhere else? This happens because the brain has been trained to wander. We live in anticipation, constantly thinking about what comes next, mentally solving problems that have not even happened yet. A Harvard study found that on average people spend nearly 47% of their time thinking about something other than what they are currently doing. And interestingly, the more often this happens, the lower the level of well-being they report. The good news is, this can be changed. One of the most effective methods is conscious breathing. Stopping for 1 minute and focusing only on the inhale and exhale is often enough to interrupt the automatic stream of thoughts and return to the present moment. Another useful technique is body scanning, moving attention slowly through different parts of the body and simply noticing sensations. These practices do not take much time. They can be done in just a few minutes during the day. Over time, this kind of training changes the way you react. You begin to notice when an automatic reaction is taking over, and gradually you gain more space to choose how to act. Being here and now is not just a wellness practice. It is the starting point for any real change. There is a fundamental difference between pain and suffering. Pain is unavoidable. It is part of life. Loss happens. Disappointment happens. But suffering is what we add on top. One person allows himself to feel pain and eventually move forward. Another feeds it with thoughts like, I will never be happy again. This always happens to me. I am not good enough. That second wave, that is suffering. And it is not inevitable. Various studies confirm that the way we interpret negative events directly affects the intensity and duration of our suffering. In other words, what keeps you stuck in pain is not the event itself, but the meaning you attach to it. This is not about ignoring pain or pretending everything is fine. It is about allowing yourself to feel without turning pain into your identity. Observing your emotions, naming them, and accepting that feeling is not weakness. This alone reduces suffering. When you fight pain, it lingers. When you resist it, it grows. Attachment is not only about relationships, it is about expectations, about wanting life to unfold exactly as you imagined it. And the more tightly you cling to a fixed idea of how things should be, the more you suffer when reality does not match it. This applies to plans that fail, to people who disappoint you, to images of yourself that you created. Attachments are mental constructions that slowly become emotional prisons. A vivid example is someone who has worked for years in a profession that no longer has meaning for him. He knows it. He feels it every day. But he stays attached to the idea that changing paths would mean failure. In that case, the attachment is not to the job, but to the identity built around it. Another common example is attachment to control in relationships. Someone believes that if the other person changes, everything will improve. And so they remain trapped in that illusion again and again, feeling disappointed when reality refuses to follow the imagined script. Psychological research shows that the higher the level of emotional attachment, the stronger the perceived suffering. because attachment places your inner peace into something external that you do not fully control. Letting go does not mean giving up. It means accepting that you cannot control everything, and that your inner calm cannot depend entirely on external circumstances. When the demand for life to be exactly the way you want it softens, space appears. Space to live what is instead of what you expected. The way you speak to yourself shapes everything: your mood, your decisions, your confidence. And the surprising part is that most of this inner dialogue happens unnoticed. Think about how you react to your own mistakes. Many people attack themselves, judge themselves, compare themselves to others. These thoughts may seem harmless, but they have real effects. Research shows that people with negative inner dialogue experience more stress and are more prone to anxiety and depression. It is like living with a constant critic in your head. Imagine someone forgets an important meeting at work. A healthy inner voice would say, "That happened. What can I do now to fix it?" But for many, the voice sounds like, "I am a complete failure. No one will ever trust me again." That kind of inner conversation does not solve the problem. It only deepens guilt and paralyzes action. This is where reprogramming your inner dialogue begins. It is not about lying to yourself or repeating empty positive phrases. It is about questioning automatic thoughts and replacing self-judgment with useful questions. Replacing "I never succeed" with "What can I learn from this?" It sounds simple, but this shift in language changes how you respond to life. You may not be able to stop the stream of thoughts completely, but you can change the tone in which you speak to yourself. And that changes everything: how you face difficulty, how resilient you become, and even your mental health. Resilience is not about silently enduring. It is about turning pain into something meaningful. When you understand this, you stop seeing challenges as obstacles and start seeing them as part of growth. Imagine someone who unexpectedly lost a job. The first reaction is despair and frustration, but over time, that experience can become a turning point. I know people who started businesses, changed careers, or found paths that fit who they truly are after being laid off. It was not easy, but it was possible, and it changed their lives. According to research published in psychological journals, people who went through serious hardship and managed to reinterpret it in the long term showed higher levels of life satisfaction. The pain did not disappear, but it became a catalyst for change. That is what separates those who break from those who grow stronger. Not the absence of pain, but how it is used. The right question in difficult moments is not, "Why is this happening to me?" but "What can I do with this right now?" And remember, resilience is not built in the middle of a crisis. It is cultivated beforehand through small daily choices, taking care of your emotional state, developing self-awareness, creating space between stimulus and reaction. Inner peace is not something you stumble upon. It is built. It is built through the small decisions you make every day, choosing not to react to a thought but to observe it, choosing to take a deep breath instead of exploding, choosing to disconnect for a few minutes from everything in order to reconnect with yourself. These are simple but consistent actions that shape how you relate to the world. Imagine someone who is criticized all day at work, under pressure, exhausted. He can come home and unload everything on his loved ones who did nothing wrong. Or he can recognize his emotions, pause, breathe, and speak afterward. That is a choice, and that choice changes everything. Neuroscience research shows that the brain is plastic. The more often you practice something, the stronger the neural pathways become. This applies both to impulsive reactions and to conscious responses. Presence, changing your inner dialogue, letting go. All of this requires repetition. Understanding is not enough. You have to apply it. And perhaps the most important thing, accept that it will not always be easy. You will make mistakes, get lost, forget. But every time you choose to return, even after slipping, you strengthen the path, step by step, toward a calm that does not depend on external circumstances. And here is where everything comes together. Because if you have reached this point, you are no longer where you started. The awareness you have gained is an advantage, and the decision you make based on it will define your next step. Peace is not somewhere in the future. It begins in how you choose to live this moment. If this material helped you and you want to support the channel, consider joining our members club. It allows us to keep creating new videos and gives you access to exclusive content. Or you can support us by clicking thanks. It means a lot and motivates us to keep moving forward. And if you want to explore this topic more deeply, once again, simply subscribe.